maneuver around. So the topic for tonight is really how to set up a golf course for a tournament. And we'll just, this is a presentation I actually gave to the PGA of BC for an education seminar about a month ago. And I thought it'd be good to do in this format too, because, and I don't profess to be an expert at this. There's probably people on the call that know more than I do and do a better job than I do. So I don't want you to think that I'm an expert. I've been doing this just really for 3 seasons and going into my 4th season of doing this. I've learned a lot along the way, and I thought maybe it'd be good to pass on what I've learned, and hopefully we can all learn a little bit of something tonight. But that's the idea anyway. So let's see here. So what are our objectives when we set up the golf course? And I guess I should say, set up the golf course. I mean, you could be as a lead referee or a rules chair for one of our events. It could be just for a club championship. It could be for anything. So this is just hopefully very, applies to a lot of people. So our objective is to make the job of if we are referees in the golf course, to make it as easy as possible for referees. We don't want there to be things out there that they have to make decisions on the spot. We'd like to, if the golf course is marked properly, hopefully the players and the referees can see what's going on. Obviously, that's the second point there, to make things as clear as possible for the players. We want to make the competition as fair as possible, and we want to help pace of play too. You can set up a golf course to make a 6-hour round if you want. That's not something we want to do. So I wanted to start with out of bounds. We first go to a golf course, looking around. We want to make sure that out of bounds is defined well. Lots of things can define out of bounds. Obviously, it can be an out of bounds fence. You could use a cart path or a road. It could be a wall. Obviously, the go to white stakes. We can paint a white line. We like to avoid that whenever we can. I'd rather not paint if I don't have to. One thing, if it is a multi-day event or even a one-day event, when you're putting the white stakes, we like to kind of paint a white circle around the stakes so we know where they are. So that in case the white stakes get moved, you can always know where they are. And you also want to make sure that you can line up those white stakes either with your eye or with a piece of long rope or something, so that you can actually tell if a ball is out of bounds or not. And obviously, you need to list what's out of bounds and how it's defined very clearly, or as clear as you can, in your notice to players. I should get the participants. Sorry, just gonna give me a sec here. I'm just gonna make sure I can see everybody. Michael Parker's got his hand up. Michael, I don't know if you've got a question or not, but you can definitely ask it if you'd like. Maybe not. Okay. Penalty areas. With the new rules, and I'm talking about the 2019 rules, a lot did change with penalty areas. Obviously, they're not called hazards anymore. That's the first thing. But we very rarely use a yellow penalty area anymore. We really try to avoid them, because in a yellow penalty area, there's only 3 options. They can go back on the line, they can play it as it lies, or they can take stroke and distance. And a lot of times that back of the line is not practical or can't be found at all, and then you're in trouble. So this is an example. This is a golf course we went to last year. I hope you can see this. This is the tee. I don't know if hopefully you can see my mouse. This is the tee over here going in this direction, par 3, and the green. This is a big gully down here. Now, if a ball actually went over here, and this is a big hill, went over here, this is how it was marked when we got there. Actually, this was all marked as yellow. Even where the red is was marked as yellow when we first got to this golf course. So if a person, kind of hooks or slices a ball, depending on their hand, in like this and goes across that yellow line there, well, their back on the line they can't do it, because it's a big hill and a bunch of trees and everything like that. So they have to go back to the tee, and they might not know that till they get up there, and now you're ruining pace of play, and a lot of other things come into effect. So we just made this all red. We made this all red, and really, does it give a big advantage to the player? I don't think so. It just makes it clear, and that if their ball does get over the red line and goes back in, hopefully they can take their 2 club lengths not close to the hole and play on. So just I don't know if it's a good example, but it's just an example. This was at Bootleg Gap last season when we went there. We took a lot of yellow stakes out. I think their superintendent left it the way we set it up. Just say, you might know this. I know we've got a lot of rules in the call. We might have some people that aren't as familiar with the rules. For normal play, a red penalty area does not have to be marked. If you're just having normal play, in fact, it doesn't have to be marked at all. What the rules actually says is that when the edge of a body of water is not defined by the committee, the edge of that penalty area is defined by its natural boundaries. That is where the ground slopes down to form the depression that can hold the water. So normal play, that's fine. I mean, I know a golf course here in Victoria that doesn't mark their penalty areas at all. They just leave them out there, no stakes, no lines in there or anything. But when we're playing an event, and I'd like to know what they do for tournament play, I think they all should be marked and defined, either through stakes or painted lines. You can use physical features like, I guess, Victoria Golf Club could use the beach as a physical feature, but I'd be careful about doing that. Okay, yeah, I got that on there. So we want to be careful when using physical features, and you want to make sure that it's clear on how that penalty area is defined. When we're setting up our events, we try to keep the stakes outside of the penalty area. And I know for regular purposes and for maintenance purposes, sometimes this is tough to do. But for tournament play, if you can move the stakes so they're outside the penalty area, it does do a few things. Because they're only there really, this is when you paint a line. Sorry, when you have them painted. Because if that stake makes a hole in the ground and then it's lifted or removed or somehow, and the ball goes into it, well, if that hole is in the penalty area, the player's, SOL, as we say. But if it's outside the penalty area, then they would get relief from that. So I don't think it's fair for them to have to play their ball when it's in a hole that's formed by a penalty area stake. We also try to keep all obstructions outside the penalty area whenever possible, because as you know, they cease to become an obstruction once they're inside the penalty area. So we want to try to do that. The other thing about penalty areas is we try to ensure that a player can tell if their ball has gone in there or not. So again, for maintenance purposes, a lot of golf courses will have their penalty area, their stakes outside the long grass. There'll be the penalty area start, and there'll be a bunch of long grass. Then the penalty area will start, and there'll be water. And the problem with that is if a player hits their ball there going towards that penalty area, but can't actually see it splash or go in, then they don't know whether it's in the long grass or whether it's in the penalty area. And so really that ball, then they have to play stroke and distance because they're not sure the ball's in the penalty area. So that's very common when we go to a golf course and we start to mark it, that we make sure those long grass areas are inside the penalty area and not outside of it. Hope that makes sense to everybody. Here's an example of kind of maybe not knowing whether your ball is in the penalty area. This is a hole at Uplands Golf Club, a short par 4, where many players will try to get close to the green. And if you slice your ball as a right-handed player off the tee and it goes towards this penalty area here, you really can't see it because there's some trees in the way. And so if your ball is kind of heading towards that penalty area, but you don't see it splash, well, it's kind of tough to say your ball is in the penalty area because the way this is marked right now, it could be outside the penalty area somewhere in here, or if it goes over here, it could be out of bounds or in the penalty area. We don't know. And so it's enough uncertainty for a referee to say, well, you know what, you got to go back to the tee. So we got our men's senior there this year, and I'll talk to Trevor when we're there. I'm not sure if he knows about this, or I'm sure he does, but I would not like this the way it's marked for a tournament. I just want everything to the right of here to be penalty area. And I'd probably even mark this, get rid of this out of bounds where it meets the penalty area, and make this penalty area also. With the new rules, you can make almost anything a penalty area. It doesn't have to have water anymore or anything like that. So I hope that makes sense, that if you've got an area like that, you're circling a penalty area, but you can't really see where when the ball goes towards there. You got to be careful because, as I say, unless you got to be certain, 19 out of 20 times certain that it's in the penalty area to take that penalty area relief. This is at Royal Colwood. Just wanted to show you this. I don't know if this is into the 9th hole. Oops, sorry. This is into the 9th hole at Royal Colwood. And you can see here, I don't know if I can get it closer, but you see that white stake right there. Right now, the out of bounds is way up on the hill. And if I go forward here, you see how in the summertime, this gets into all long grass along this hill. And this is a very common thing for balls to go in here. So you see see the penalty area way up there. So, sorry, the out of bounds. Sorry, the out of bounds stake way up there. We could make this a penalty area. We could make it penal and make it out of bounds. I think the committee is going to make this a penalty area. They're talking to me. And then we got to decide, okay, do we make the penalty area? Do we include the cart path in the penalty area? Do we not include the cart path in the penalty area? Do we put the stakes here? What do we do? And if wherever we put the penalty area, what if they can't really find relief? And this is where a drop zone comes in. And so this is kind of the drop zone that I'd probably recommend, is somewhere here where it's not giving the player a big advantage. It's far enough away from the green and a tough enough shot that it's not giving them a big advantage to go from where they might have been able to drop it, where not quite close, not quite, it's closer to the hole, but it's not, it's only a yard closer to the hole. But we give them a penalty area that might be closer to the hole, and hopefully not as bad. Tom, did you have a question? Nope.
Nope.
Okay. Sorry. So hopefully that's a little. I just back up again. So this is a tough one. As a committee, you got to make a choice. If the cart path is not in the penalty area, and their ball is not on the cart path, well, now they've got to find a spot. They either play it from the cart path or have to find a spot that could be way away. That's not close to the hole. That would be their nearest point of completely relief. Or you can put the stakes out where these green and white stakes are, put the penalty area there, and now the cart path is part of the penalty area, and they have to decide whether they want to take relief or play it. So always tough decisions to make on these ones, but you try your best. Try to make sure it's fair, but you also don't want to give the player a big advantage from a bad shot. Okay, no play zones. Let me know if I'm going too fast. No play zones. So the committee can make almost anything a no play zone. That's the new term. If you haven't heard that term before, in the old rules, sometimes environmentally sensitive areas, or ESA was used as a term. Now it's no penalty area, no penalty zone. So no play zone. Sorry, jeez. And no play zone can either be a penalty area or an abnormal course condition. But a player must take relief if their ball is in the no play zone, or if it interferes with their stance or swing. So even if just their swing is going to hit some grass in that no play zone, or their stance in the no play zone, they must take relief. If there's a penalty area, usually red stakes with green tops are recommended. If there's an abnormal ground condition, white or blue stakes with green tops are recommended. So for abnormal ground condition, course condition, obviously it's free relief. And so it depends. So usually flower beds, things like that, are made abnormal course conditions, and they're made no play zones. But penalty areas, if it's a normal penalty area, but you just don't want people going in there for environmental reasons or anything else, then obviously it's a no play zone that is a penalty area. Hope that makes sense. I'll just leave that there for a second. So don't be afraid to use these, but they're part of the rules. And if you don't want people going somewhere, that's just fine. Okay. Abnormal ground conditions. Obviously, ground and repair. I would really recommend that before you start marking ground and repair, you take a very good course tour, so that you know whether something is normal for that course or not. Because remember, we're talking about abnormal ground conditions. So, we've driven around a golf course, and you see the first part of maybe some grass that's maybe a little bit diseased, so it's brown, it kind of doesn't look nice, and it maybe wouldn't be the best lie for a player. But you continue turning around the course, and there's lots of fairway, lots of it on the fairways, or it's all over the place. Well, that's not abnormal for that golf course, so we wouldn't mark that. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just, if it's really bad, then obviously we want to mark it. And we always ask ourselves, is this something that should be repaired? Because that's really what ground and repair means. When we do mark it, we usually define with white lines, and we try to avoid it in the rough. I've definitely marked ground repair in the rough, but we try to avoid it. When you're marking it like something like this, if this was the only, this is kind of what I was kind of saying, if this was the only instance of this in the golf course, I'd probably mark this. But if this was, very common, then I wouldn't mark it. So it really depends on the golf course where you're at and what's abnormal for that golf course. Here's not a good way to mark ground and repair. It's not really obvious where the ground and repair starts or where it is. That's not just a bad example. And this isn't a pretty good example, even though there's a couple of divots there. This is the abnormal ground condition in the fairway or the ground repair, and just mark around it. And don't try to get your lines, like I've seen people try to mark it and they go right where the grass meets the dirt in this case, or the brown. Just give it a generous area. Don't worry about trying to get real delicate with it, if you want, for lack of a better word. Okay, so that went through that pretty fast, and I don't see many questions out there. Maybe this is old news for most people, and that's okay if it is. We're okay out there. All right. So let's talk about hole locations a little bit then. This is from the ladies U.S. Open, I think. Oh no, sorry, 112th U.S. Open Championship. It's a few years back at the Olympic Club. These pin positions probably wouldn't be recommended for one of our tournaments. You can see how they're 3 paces from the edge and 4 paces from the edge and 3 paces from the edge. I just put up here just for interest's sake, so you can see what a U.S. Open pin sheet looks like, or hole location sheet looks like. So when you're out there picking hole locations, we want to be fair, especially for the events that we do. We want when I think about a tournament that professionals play in or amateurs play in, the main goal when we're setting up a golf course for difficulty is just to separate the field, as we used to say. And most of the events that we set up the golf course for, the field is going to separate itself. We don't have to make the golf course really, really tough, to separate the field. So not trying to make it that way at all. Not trying to make it on the edge as last week at Bay Hill was. We're trying to be fair. We try to make sure there's not much slope around the hole. I've seen people get a level out or use their iPhone as a level, and if there's a 1% slope around the hole, that's usually okay. When it gets up to 3%, that's not usually okay. And if you're not familiar with that, that's okay. That's just a way to designate how big a slope is, the percent of the slope. If you don't want to do that, what we just do is kind of roll balls from all directions around the hole. Make sure you do it from all of the directions, and hope and a ball, you should be able to get a ball to stop within 4 feet of that hole, no matter what direction you're rolling the ball from. So we had pin position out there at Colwood today that it wasn't really very good. If you got above the hole and you tap the ball, it went about 8 feet by the hole. And so it was on about probably a 4% slope. Actually, it was kind of tough. So we try to avoid those whenever possible. As a kind of our guideline, we try to keep them at least 4 paces from the edge of the green. And we want to take a lot of things into effect. What speed are the greens going to be? How firm are they going to be? What is the weather forecast? Are they going to soften up? Are they going to firm up? What club are the players hitting in? So if I'm setting a pin position for our BC amateur, I might be able to tuck it to the front of the green over a bunker because the players are hitting in a 9-iron or a wedge into a par 3 or something like that. But if I'm doing it for our Bantam Championship, let's say, I wouldn't do that because the players are probably maybe hitting in a 5-iron or even a hybrid into that same distance, and so they won't be able to stop the ball. And so I'm always trying to figure out who the field is and what they're hitting into the hole. What angle is the player coming from? What's the prevailing wind? Is the ball going to land on a downslope or an upslope? Does the player have to fly the ball in there? Do they have to carry a bunker or water or long rough, or can they run it in? And obviously just the overall skill of the field. To give an example of this, we had our mid-amateur at Gorge Vale last year, which is a great golf course and tough greens. And when we got there, the greens were running great. This is late August, but they were holding very well too. They're really in good shape. And during the practice round on the Monday, the wind started to really come up. It whipped up to about 60 kilometers an hour. And it did the same on the first day. It really dried the greens out. And a lot of the pins that we're going to put out there, the players weren't going to be able to hold it below the hole, and even with a good shot. And so we tried to change the pins as much as we could to make sure that it was fair. Now, a lot of players, some of the players couldn't, if they hit in the rough, they still couldn't hold the ball below the hole, and they ended up with some tough downhill putts. But that's, I figure that's okay. As long as a good shot can be held for the majority of the field below the hole, then I figure that's okay. But that was one where, boy, those greens dried out quick and they got firm, and it was a lot tougher to find some good hole locations. I don't know if hopefully everybody's heard the term boxing off a green. So when we're measuring or going to do a pin sheet, maybe let's go back to here for a second. So I don't know. Again, I'm sorry if I'm talking below or above anybody. I don't know what the knowledge level is on the call, and I apologize if in advance if some of this goes over somebody's head, or if this is just all old hat. So, if I look at the first hole here, the green depth is 25. That's 25 paces or yards. And so this pin would be 13 paces on, and then 4 paces from the left edge. And you see where these 2 dots are. Though that's where the green is measured. So it's 25 paces deep from those 2 dots. And you can see there's 2 dots on this one, and on all these holes, they kind of have the 2 dots. You don't have to do that, but you do want to get an accurate measurement for your own purposes to get the depth of the green. And so when you're doing this, you look at the direction of play that a player is coming in at. So this red arrow is a direction of play. And then for this green, you'd kind of box it off. So you'd get right to the front edge here. You'd make a box so it goes right through the back edge. And then you'd pace the depth of this box. So that's how I get that's how I get the depth of the green. I hope that makes sense. Now, when I'm going from the edge of the green, I didn't do this box very well, but if I had the box kind of on the edge of the green, I don't worry about that. That's why I probably didn't do it. I just pace right to the edge. Whatever edge is closest, I just pace to that edge. So if the pin is up here, hopefully you can see my mouse, I just pace to this edge. I wouldn't pace, all the way. I wouldn't put a number down that was from there all the way to there. I would just put a number down that's from there to there. Because a player just wants to know how close that hole location is to the nearest edge of the green. But when they're measuring depth, that's more important to get the depth of the green properly, because when you have a sprinkler head, I know they use lasers these days, but in the old days when we used to have to pace things off, all those measurements are usually taken to the center of the green, and this is how a center of the green is measured in the center of that box. I hope I'm making sense. I'm not getting any questions, so I'm going to assume I am. I hope please feel free to ask questions. This is kind of a worksheet that one of our rules chairs or myself might use for a 4-day tournament, because I want to try to make sure that I'm having an equal or fairly equal amount of front, back, and center pins, and then left, right, or center pins. So this might be change a lot depending on what I see on the golf course. This is just an example. So I've got all the green depths listed here on the left, all the hole numbers, obviously. And then this would be a guide. Okay, so on day 1, on hole number 1, I'm going to try to have a left pin that's center in terms of front, center, back. And hole number 2, maybe you're going to have another left pin, but it's going to be back. Hole number 3 is going to be a right pin, center. And you can see I've just done that. I've just laid this out so it's well spaced out, but there's an equal number of each for each day. And it becomes quite a task to do sometimes. So it's just a way for me to kind of keep myself honest. And if I change one of these, if I change this to a back pin also, then maybe I'll look for another one that is a back and change it to a center. Maybe I had to change this to a back pin because I couldn't find a center location or whatever it is. So I try to just do that. If anybody wants a spreadsheet like this, I can definitely get it to you. No problem at all. Okay. Setting hole location is a very important part of the job. If you're, I know sometimes a club championship, you'll just let the superintendent do it, which is great. When we go in for a provincial championship, we like to set up the hole location so that we know that that they're good and they're fair, and we would definitely use the superintendent. We try to talk to him or her, and yeah, I'll send this to everybody on an email that'll go out tomorrow. I'll send this spreadsheet out to everybody. What was I going to say? Sorry, I got my off track a little bit, but hopefully you can see how that works. Question here. We got a question like, how willing are golf courses to let you decide on hole locations? So it's really how you talk to the superintendent. That's a really good question. So you want to have a good relationship with the superintendent, and or their assistant or whoever is doing that. So, when I approach the superintendent, I actually sent out some emails today to superintendents that were hosting events. I just say, look, I don't want anything different for what you're doing. But we would do like to set up hole locations, love to have your help. And then we say, how would you like us to mark them? Do you want us to paint them? Some superintendents don't like paint on the green. I've been using a really thick Sharpie to just kind of put a little dot on the green so the superintendent can see it. But if you give them, or some of them say, just give me the measurements and, I know what I'm doing. I'll find a good spot right around those measurements. So we had a question here about just what are these blank spots? So these blank spots here, so on the first hole, I'm going to try to get, by my calculations here, a left pin that's center. These are for these will be the actual measurements. So if it's a 25 green depth, maybe I'll have one that's, 12 paces on, and then maybe 5 from the left-hand side. And so I'll fill it in. It'll be 12 and 5. And the next one was going to be a back pin. So this one might be 30. And again, maybe 4 from the left. And this one's going to be a center pin. So it's going to be around, anywhere between 13 and 17. And then it's going to be so many paces from the right-hand side. This one's a front pin. So it might only be 8 paces on or whatever it is. And it's going to be, again, 6 or 5 from the left-hand side. Hope that makes sense. The specific shape of the greens. Somebody asked, are the specific shape of the greens for pin sheet important, or just circle okay? I think a circle is fine. We just use circles, actually, for a pin sheet. I don't know if I've got an example on here. No, I don't think I do, but I can put one up. That basically, so this pin sheet here, they've got the actual shapes of the greens, which is great if you can do it. But just having a circle, that says 23 on and 6 from the right, that's just fine for almost every competition. This actually comes out of a USGA program called Deacon that I'm hoping we can get access for they have to actually come up and GPS the golf courses. There's a few golf courses that are done in BC here, but I'm hoping more and more golf courses can be done. And you never know, your superintendent might have something like this, or the superintendent of the golf course you're going to. Just ask, do you have anything that with the shape of your greens on it? But if you don't, and you just use circles, please don't worry about that. That's just fine. The other thing I was going to say is some people, or I guess, got the idea, maybe because of the handicapping they thought was more important than the actual, I don't know why they thought it, but they try to keep the course kind of the same length for each day. We'll talk about that a little bit, but so if it's for example, if this was a back pin on the second hole, they'll make sure the tees are moved up a little bit. Or if this is a front pin on the fourth hole, they'll make sure the tees are back a little bit. I definitely would not worry about that. Even if you change the hole length by 20 to 30 yards, it really doesn't affect the rating that much. And I would just use the same rating for handicap purposes that you'd normally do. I really wouldn't worry about that. Yeah, so talking to superintendent, sorry, I guess I kind of got off that a little bit. So I'd approach the superintendent and say, look, I just got a tournament coming up. I'd love to be able to know what the hole locations are. I want to have a pin sheet. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to help set the pin locations, or actually set them and walk out there with you. And every superintendent I've come up against so far, they're great people. They work hard. If you haven't met your superintendent or thanked them for what they do, please do that. There's some great superintendents out there, and I said I haven't met a bad one yet. Most of them care deeply for their golf course. So I would go out there and let them know what you're doing. And if you're going to set your own tee boxes up, which we'll talk about in a second, they'll thank you. They'll say, great, that's awesome. They might not want to take their tee boxes down, because that's work for them to move them off the side and put them back. But if you want to do that, if you say, look, I'm going to move your tee boxes off to the side and just put ours on the tee box, so there's no confusion, and I'll put yours back, they'll be happy with that. Just as long as you approach them with the thought that, what, I don't want to have to make them or the crew work harder. I just want to make sure my tournament's in good. And most of them will offer to do all this stuff for you. For example, we ask most service superintendents to take the rakes, make sure the rakes are out of the bunkers, which a lot of them leave them in these days. We ask them to take the 150 poles out of the fairways. Not that you need to do this for a one-day event, but for our provincial championships, we try to do that. And you know what? I haven't run into any qualms at all about this. Yeah, so I really, it's about just making sure you're talking to them in a way that's you're deferential to them, and they know that you're not trying to make their life harder. I guess is the best way to put that. So talking about setting up tees, you kind of do want to know how long you want the golf course to play. So you want to know the skill level of your field, and you want to know, okay, I'd like the golf course to play 5,200 yards long or 6,500 yards long or whatever it is, and kind of have a basic number in your mind. But you do want to watch for forced carries. You want to know what the weather forecast is, the prevailing wind, and things like that, so that hopefully you can take all those things into account. We like to try to keep track of par 3 yardages to make sure that they're not all similar. So as a player myself, I think it's a boring thing to play 4 par 3s and have to hit 7-iron on all 4 of them. I'd rather hit wedge on one and 6-iron on another one. I want to make sure those are mixed up, those par 3 yardages. Now, again, we don't want to favor the left or right hand side with hole locations, and we don't want to do the same thing for tee locations. Mix it up a little bit. Watch out for overhanging tree branches, and we always try to leave at least 2 club lengths on the back of the tee, because obviously that's the teeing area is defined by that 2 club lengths. As a general template, we do about 5 paces wide on par 4s and par 5s, and then wider for par 3s. Par 3s, obviously you want to have a nice patch of grass, so you might move your tees around to make sure you've got that, and you'd like a level spot, and sometimes that doesn't happen. What do I mean by a forced carry? All I mean by a forced carry is when you have to hit a shot that carries or flies over water or flies over a gully, or any place that if you land short of that, your ball is going to be lost or be in a penalty area. I don't want to have a 150 yard, if I can avoid it. I don't want to have a 150 yard forced carry, and hope nobody takes offense to this, but for a senior women's event, I try to avoid 150 yard forced carry, especially if it's up a hill. Those aren't fun, and you want your field to have fun. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Get rid of this for a second. So, yeah, setting up tees isn't real difficult. Now, if you have a 1, 2, or 3 day event or whatever it is, and you want to keep track of things, when you put your tees down, usually on day 1, you'll put 1 dot kind of underneath the tee box or right beside the tee marker, I should say, or underneath the tee marker or right beside the tee marker, so you know where it was on day 1. And then on day 2, you'd put 2 dots down, which is after you set the tee, or as you're setting the tee markers up. And so on day 3, you put 3 dots down, and that way you know where the tee markers are. So again, if they get moved, you know where they go back. So that's always a nice little practice to have too. Okay, so that's kind of setting up a golf course, and please keep the questions going. If you have questions, I'll kind of keep going in my presentation here, but please keep asking anything that comes to mind. Please keep asking the questions. Okay, there's lots of model local rules, and and probably in the email that will go out tomorrow following this up, I'll include our terms of competition. I haven't got our terms of competition done for this year yet. I'm kind of waiting for Golf Canada to do theirs, and BC Golf, we try to follow Golf Canada as much as we can. But there are some model local rules that I think you should know about, and even at your golf course, if you're on a committee or anything like that you might want to put on your scorecard or just post up somewhere so people know that you're playing by these model local rules. Yeah. Sorry, I got a question about a zone committee purchase or obtaining their own team markers. Yeah, there's lots of ways to buy team markers. There's lots of companies out there that sell team markers. Some of them aren't cheap. Some of them are a lot less expensive. So yeah, if you please email me. This is from Holly. Holly, just email me and I'll try to get you some vendors. You probably want to go through your golf course though, because they're going to get wholesale prices, and you might have to pay retail depending on who you are. They might charge you more than your golf course can buy them for. But okay, so model some question here. Yeah, if you want to use combo tees, I'd really sorry, just going back to tee questions. If you want to use combo tees, I really try to use, like, if you're using both at a golf course, and say you're using I don't know, a blue-white combo. Some golf courses will have one tee marker that's painted blue and white. Some golf courses will have either blue and white markers. Just make sure they're right together, that the blue and white markers are right together. And I tend to put the blue on the outside of one side and the white on the other outside of the other side. To give an example, like the blue and white markers would be together, and the blue would be on the outside or closest to the rough on the left-hand side, and the white would be on the outside or closest to the rough on the right-hand side, so that people can see that those are the tees they play. Yeah, just make them stand out somehow, whatever way you can. Because you're right, you don't want your players playing the wrong tees. That's for sure. I've done it once, and hopefully I won't do it again. I don't know how many competitive golfers we got out there, but if you haven't played the wrong ball yet or teed up from the wrong tee markers, just prepare to at least once in your career. It happens to all of us. Okay. Model local rules. A3 and A4 are for out of bounds and can describe internal out of bounds. For example, I don't know how many people have played Victoria Golf Club, but whoops. You can kind of see the diagram on the right here. This is Victoria Golf Club. This is the third hole going from the bottom of the screen to the top. And this is the way you normally play the golf course. This is the 11th, right? 10th or 11th hole, I always get it wrong, coming down the left. And the beach drive goes right to the center. So what they've done is they said, okay, any ball that crosses the road, or they've got a fence here with out of bounds, any ball that crosses that out of bounds on the third hole is out of bounds, even if it ends up back on the golf course over here on this hole. And the same way, playing this hole back down, any ball that crosses there is out of bounds, even if it ends up on the fairway over here. So sometimes you want to have internal out of bounds, and you want to put a model local rule in for that. This is since the new rules have come out, this used to be a rule of golf where you could take relief on the opposite side of what they used to call a lateral penalty, a lateral hazard, now a red penalty area. There is a model local rule to put that back in. So for an example, on this hole here, if this person hit a right-handed big slice and kind of went across here and went back in kind of where I got that arrow, well, they would have to they probably have to hit again from the tee, because to go back on the line would bring them back in this forest, or maybe they can't even get across this river. And so they can't get across at all to play. If you put this model local rule in effect, they could take the point where it last crossed that yellow line, that red line, and take it equidistant on this side of the water, take their 2 club lengths and keep playing. So it's just a nice model local rule to have in situations like this, where maybe you can't get to the other side of the red penalty area, and you don't want to penalize players too much, because basically if this happens, then it'd be like hitting it out of bounds. You'd have to go stroke and distance again. Hope that makes sense. Provisional ball. There is a model local rule that allows you to play a provisional ball for a ball that you might think is in a penalty area. So usually you cannot play a provisional ball. I should say, phrase it this way, you can only play a provisional ball if you think your ball is lost or out of bounds. This local rule allows you to play a provisional ball if you think your ball is in the penalty area and you won't be able to play it. And then if you go up there and you find your ball in the penalty area and you can play it, that's fine. You can play it. Or if you know that it went across the line up there, you can take your relief. You can do everything you can usually do. But if you go up there and you can't find your ball, you know it's in the penalty area then, and you've already played your provisional. I know they do this at Cowichan on the 10th, the 11th hole. It's mainly done for places where you're going over water and you can't quite tell. Well, I can't tell if my ball is on the bank over there, if I can play it or not. And so just to save time, we're going to put this rule in effect so I can play, because it entered on this side. So I'm going to play a ball here. But if I find my ball up there, I'm going to be able to play it. I don't know if I'm describing that too well, but hopefully it makes sense. Double green. If you're setting up a golf course with a double green, this is Mayfair Lakes, 9 and 18. You can separate a double green using stakes or dots to make the green for the hole not being played a wrong green. So for example, on this picture here, if I'm playing the hole with the 18th hole, which is the far pin, and somehow I go for it in 2 and hit a bad shot, but gets over here on this green, well, I might not want people taking a wedge and wedging it over there. The superintendent might get mad at you for people doing that. So you'd make this a wrong green. You'd put stakes or dots right here, which they usually do at Mayfair Lakes. They've taken them out for this picture. But there's usually stakes right here. So you know that this is the 9th green and this is the 18th green. If your ball ends up on this green and you're playing this green, then you'd have to take relief. Hope I'm not talking too fast, but that's for a double green. Very, very common to do this, to make sure to separate them into two greens for the rules. Drop zones. Kind of talked about drop zones already. Model Local Rule E1 describes how to define a drop zone. They should be used when it's difficult or impossible to find a nearest spot of complete relief under a rule. And hopefully they don't give advantage to the player in tournament conditions. So this hole here, they've painted this red. This obviously defines the penalty area. The ball comes in here. Well, there's not really any spot closer to the hole. That isn't closer to the hole that they can find complete relief. And then they've got the cart path here. And so you'd probably put a drop area in. And again, trying to put an area that is not really easy, is very comparable to the shot that they would have from here. When you're going to set up a tournament though, I don't know if I say this later on the PowerPoint, but make sure you look at the drop areas that are in play and see if you want them to be in play. The first line of all of our notice to players is always any local rules that are posted in the club or on the scorecard do not apply, because the club might have a lot of local rules that really do take it that basically you do not want for tournament play. So you want to make sure that if you do want the local rules that they've got in place, that's fine. But if there's local rules on the scorecard, and I've been to courses where the rules on the scorecard, they're not actual model local rules, and so they're not really the rules of golf. So you want to be aware of that. Preferred lies, we've been doing that for a few months now. When we're playing summer tournaments, we do it only when absolutely necessary. If a player is getting one mud ball around, I wouldn't worry about it. But if they're getting mud on the ball like half the time in the fairway, then definitely I would do this. And so preferred lies is, and you can word it how you want to use. You could be in the short. It's usually for the short mown area only, or actually it is. If you read the local rule, it is for the short mown area only. And usually you say 6 inches. You can go more than that, but hopefully you don't have to. Okay, so these are, as I said, I'll get, you can always look it up on our website, but I can get this to you too. And these are things that are on the BC Golf, what we sometimes call the hard card, our local rules in terms of competition. So these are things that we have in effect for all of our tournaments. So if you are a zone, or you're running a tour, or even at your golf course, if you want to have some local rules that are always in effect, throughout the year, or you're a zone and you want these local rules to be in effect for every tournament you run, we usually call that local rules in terms of competition. This one hopefully will come, well, this will come out the next rule book, but it was put in for this rule book. This comes to effect if your ball rolls closer to the hole than your reference point. So give you an example, you're taking back on the line relief and you don't put a tee in the ground or a reference point. So what happens is the reference point is wherever your ball lands and your ball rolls closer to the hole. So you drop your ball, it rolls a little bit closer to the hole than where it landed. Hope I'm getting this right. You can still play it with this model local rule in place. It's still in play because it's not really close to the hole, right? You're taking back on the line relief. You can go back as far as you want. But if you don't, again, I'll just try to describe that again. So you're going back on the line, you're finding you're going back on the line, go back as far as you want. If you don't put a tee in the ground or a reference point, when you drop your ball from knee height these days, wherever it lands, by the rules, that becomes your reference point. So that doesn't roll more than a club length away from that. But if it rolls a little closer to the hole than where it landed, this model local rule just lets you play it without penalty. That's a long explanation for this local model rule. Extension to the cart path. We have this in for all our tournaments. So basically, this allows the player to treat damaged ground, which is right next to an artificially surfaced road or path, as a single abnormal ground condition when taking relief. So we don't want to have to go out and mark all these dirt areas beside cart paths as ground and repair. That would be a pain. So this model local rule allows you just to determine that, okay, this is all one abnormal ground condition, the cart path plus all these worn edges that are near it or at the end of it. So I'd really recommend having that on your hard card. Seams of cut turf. So, if there's new grass on the golf course, they just lay down sod. If it interferes with the area of the pentance with the ball or the swing, they can take relief. And so another one we just have in there to try to protect golf courses. We don't want people hitting off new sod on golf courses, especially when they're nice enough to host a tournament. So we have that in here. F12 and F13 allow the player to take relief from animal dung and from animal and hoof damage. So, if from elk or deer or things like that, I found that I was putting this on every notice to players, didn't matter where we were in the province. So I just put it on our hard card that you can get relief from hoof prints. Again, another thing you might want to just consider because it's not in the rules of golf, and neither is animal dung. So I don't want to have to. I don't want to have to remove that stuff with my hand or anything like that. So I'd rather have a model local rule that lets the player take relief. Damaged club. This is a recommended one. It was brought in by the USG and the RNA almost right after the rules were released. It allows a player to replace a club that is broken or significantly damaged during the round. So if they, for no fault of their own, their iron does this, hopefully not, or their driver cracks or something like that, they can replace that club. They can't under the rules, but they can when this model local rule G9 is in place. Practicing between holes. Sometimes we forget that, under the rules, it is just fine to hit putts on the green you just played, or even to chip around the green you just played. So this model local rule just prohibits that. Okay, so we don't want people, pace of play wise, and also just fairness of competition, that just because they have time to do it and somebody else doesn't, that they get to practice on a little bit more in between holes. We don't want that happening in our competition, so we put this model local rule in. That's a very common one to have in for tournament play. Oh, I guess that was it. So that's my little slideshow. Oh, 10 to 8. Okay, pretty good timing. About trying to set up a golf course for tournament play. I was going to show you just, let's see if I can do this easily. Because I just talked about model local rules a lot. This is a site I use a lot, the RNA site. You can use USGA too, but the RNA site is very good for the rules. And I'm just going to go into rules here. And where's my local rules creator? I hope you can see that. I'm going to click there. This is a great little resource. Shows you all the local all the local rules that you want. So if you want something about out of bounds, you can expand that. Clarifying boundary when using wall or road. Okay, and then I can say, yeah, I want to use that one. I'll click that off, and then I'll say, okay, maybe I want that penalty area one where it's relief on opposite side. So I'll click that off. And then at the end, I can just go my rules files, and it just kind of brings them up for me. So you can copy them to a clipboard or put them on a Word document or anything you want. This is the RNA has done a very good job of putting this together. So please use it. And there's lots of good information here. And at the back of your if you do have an official guide to the rules of golf, there's lots of advice for a committee there also. Okay, I'll stop sharing here. There we go. Okay. Did I just overwhelm everybody, or is everybody okay out there? It's always tough to tell when you're doing one of these presentations. So again, I did record this. I'll get this recording to everybody. I'll send that Excel spreadsheet with the whole locations out. I'll try to get you some other resources. If you ever want to get a hold of me, please do. Just send me an email, Doug at, and I'll send that out to Doug at BritishColumbiaGolf.org, or give me a phone call, and we can chat. That's what we're here for. We're trying to help. Susie, did you have a question? Or Susan, do you have a question out there?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned earlier that you often take out the 150-yard marker in tournaments. Why would you do that?
Well, just when it's a post in the center of the fairway, we don't want, somebody's drive hits the post and then, they get penalized for that. The ball went further. That's really the only reason.
So only if it's in the middle of the fairway. Yeah,
basically, if it's in the rough, especially if there's solid things that are tough to remove, then we probably leave them there. But if it's in the middle of the fairway, we tend to remove those. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
But just the 150, not the 100 as well?
No, you're right, Teresa. Any stakes are in the middle of the fairway. You're right. Yeah. Good point. There could be 100-yard stakes too. Yeah. If there's those little plastic ones that the mowers can go over, then I wouldn't bother with that. But obviously, some courses have some very big stakes, and we'll remove those. Wayne, did you have a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Doug. Yeah, it's Rosalie.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, Rosalie.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So F12, F13, the animal dung and hoof marks.
Yeah, please do.
Does that apply? Are we applying that also just in the general area, or is that also apply to the sand, the bunkers?
It doesn't apply to penalty areas, but does apply to bunkers. You can apply it or not, depending on what version of the model local rule you put in. But in a bunker, they do have to drop it in the relief area still. So it's up to them whether they want to take their chance with where it is in the footprint, or whether they want to take their chance with a drop. Yeah, we don't allow them to the model local rule does not allow you to rake over and place the ball in a nice spot.
Right. Thank you.
I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will. Yeah, thank you, Dave. I'll add that RNA link for future reference for sure. Yeah. All right. Not the most exciting subject, but it sounds like some people out there are getting a little bit out of it. I know I'm not the most colorful presenter, but anyway, I think not a lot of questions coming in. So we may have one more here. Oh no, that's fine. Yeah. So I'll let everybody go and get back to their glass of wine, or whatever you're doing tonight. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on and listening. And again, we're here to try to help out as much as we can. So just let us know what we can do.
Thanks very much, Doug.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. A great session.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.